Okay, good morning. It's wonderful to be here with a victorious member of the Knesset. He's now a member of the Likud Party, which is the party at the foundation of what seems to be the incoming governing coalition of the States of Israel. It's a real pleasure to be with you, Amichai Chikli. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Benjamin. Good morning.
Good morning. It's really wonderful to have you. A little bit of context about this conversation. It's going to be just that. It's going to be a conversation. It's not something that I'm undertaking in order to catch you out or any such thing. It's something that I want our listeners to use as an opportunity to get to know you. You're a fresh-faced new member of the Knesset, relatively speaking, and you're now, as I said, in the victorious Likud Party. And I'd like to tell everyone that you and I first met in the gym in Jerusalem, right? If you remember, that was a wonderful event of happenstance, and here you are. So let's go to the beginning. You were not someone who was in the political sphere until you were. What was it that brought you into politics in the first place?
So the past decade, I spent most of it in education, Zionist education, Jewish education. I saw the lack of knowledge, the lack of connection to Judaism, to Zionism. And we have wonderful youth in Israel, really the best youth you can imagine. They want to be in the best units and they want to volunteer and they are smart, but they know almost nothing about their Jewish roots, about their Zionist roots. And that's what took me into the educational career. And I spent more than a decade in Zionist education. And basically, with the same motivation, I went to the next phase, into politics, to strengthen the Zionist core, the Zionist agenda, the Zionist ideology, and to bring it into the government, into the Knesset, in a world that is changing and is becoming more postmodern, more progressive, counter-nationalism, counter-identity. And that's the big picture why I went into politics.
No, let's continue taking a step back, because I really want people to get to know you, because I don't believe that you're just the present. I actually believe you're the future as well. But let's go to the past. You spoke about the best youth. You spoke about the motivation of the youth to serve in the best military units.
Yeah.
Very few people encapsulate that better than you in your own biography. Tell us about your military past and your military service.
Okay, so I grew up in Jerusalem. Both my parents made Aliyah. I'm not an old family here in Israel. And so I also have a warm heart to all these lone soldiers that made Aliyah and coming to serve. And after I graduated high school, I went to a pre-military program, what we called in Israel a mechina, a leadership program, a gap year program. And it was unpopular when I went to that program 20 years ago. And then I served in Golani, one of the best infantry brigade of the IDF. I went into the reconnaissance unit of Golani. We call it Sayeret Golani, for around 5 years. Then I went to serve in the Navy SEALs as an officer that is dealing with terrain training for the Navy SEALs. I went to study my MA, and then I came back. I served in a GOZ unit. And
a GOZ unit, by the way, just so everybody knows, I really want people to understand who they're hearing from. A GOZ unit was a specific elite unit stood at as experts in jungle warfare, specifically to tackle the threat of terror from Hezbollah, emanating from southern Lebanon, seeking to infiltrate northern Israel.
Yeah, not exactly jungle, but let's say the terrain of the northern part of Israel and the southern part of Lebanon.
I take that, the forests,
rocks,
and so forth. Yeah.
And yeah.
And so sorry I interrupted you. Continue with your path.
That's it. And then MirYam, like the reserve.
Wonderful. And so you did all of that, and you end up coming into the political sphere, I'm going to come to how I believe you were misportrayed in the media repeatedly, to your benefit, ultimately, in my opinion. It's all come full circle.
Yeah.
But you are drawn out of education into politics by Naftali Bennett and his party.
Yeah.
Talk to us about your entry into the political realm.
Well, so it all began with a different party, was the Yamin Hadash, the new right. Naftali Bennett with Ayelet Shaked founded a new party, which I found refreshing, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to join them, maybe to challenge Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud from the right on various aspects, the judicial system, security, Jewish identity, the policy in Area C, in Judea and Samaria, the Galil, the Negev. And that's why from the first place, that's why I joined Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked. And unfortunately, we didn't pass the threshold at the first round. And then I went back to education for around 2 years. And in the final election a year and a half ago, sorry, I joined Yamina with Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked. It's basically the same ideology and the same party, just a different name, Yamina instead of Hayamina Hadash, but the same party, same ideology. And I thought we are supposed to be more to the right than the Likud. But all of a sudden, when Naftali Bennett had the opportunity to become the prime minister, he eventually said it's better to have the entire left parties from Yesh Atid, Kahol Lavan, the Labor, Avodah, Meretz, with an anti-Zionist Arab party, Ra'am, without the Likud, and to form a government. I think he did it only because he really wanted to be prime minister. It was his big dream. And I said, I respect your desire to be prime minister, but before I respect your desires, I respect our words, not just my words, but our words to our voters. It is democracy. We owe the power we have to the people who took the small piece of paper with the Yamina and put it in the envelope, and my heart, and not just my heart, my actions are dedicated for them and not for you. And that's why I won't follow you into this adventure. And one more thing, and I told Naftali Bennett, you're going to fail, not because you're a bad man, because you cannot be a prime minister with such a small party. It just cannot work. Benny Gantz thinks the opposite from you when it comes to Area C.
Benny Gantz was the leader of Blue and White at the time.
Yeah, and the young, we call it the Yeshvut HaTzeira, the young settlements in Judea and Samaria. Totally opposite policy from our policy. And he's a larger party. And Lapid, if it's the policy towards Iran or the US, it's just the opposite. And that's why I said, you're going to fail. It's not going to work. I'm not with you. That's basically the story.
And so just again, to give our viewers and our listeners a little bit of context, Naftali Bennett, who, as you said, came into the right of Prime Minister Netanyahu at the time, campaigned to the right of Prime Minister Netanyahu at the time, was never expected to become the prime minister, did in a feat of coalition and parliamentary mathematics, but his bedfellows in the coalition included the parties you mentioned. Just to give the names of the head of those parties, it was Mansour Abbas, Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid, Merav Michaeli, and at that time, I believe
Nitzan Horowitz, Meretz, ultra-left
Nitzan Horowitz of Meretz. So these were left of center up to far left parties that the head of Yamina made a coalition with in order to become the prime minister. Let me ask you about that. The language that came out of that effort was, we need to form a government because Israel is lurching from election to election. It's no good for Israel. We have to heal the fabric of Israeli society. We have to mend that fabric. Was that all nonsense in your opinion?
It is nonsense. Yeah, they basically said we want unity, but how can it be unity when you take more than 1 million voters of the Likud and ban them and says you are irrelevant, you cannot be part of the political game because you chose Benjamin Netanyahu to be the leader of the party democratically? And how can it be a unification, a unity government when the entire religious and Haredi parties are banned from the government and banned from the discussions about legislation, about religion and state affairs? So I didn't see it as a unity government, and I don't see it now as a unity government. I think the strategy of banning Benjamin Netanyahu and more than 1 million voters directly and 2 million supporters from Shas to the religious Zionist party, etc. This strategy failed, collapsed this week. And I think it is a lesson for the left and for the center for following years.
So let's continue to look back before we turn forward into the future.
Sure.
Once you said to Naftali Bennett, by the way, were you and Bennett close before you came into politics, or did you become close
we
only
knew each
afterwards?
other. We respected each other. We had some relationship. We weren't close friends, never.
Okay. So you come into the political realm. Naftali Bennett does a deal basically in your eyes with the political devil, one could put it that way.
I won't call him devil. They're not devil. Just it's different ideology.
Okay. I meant politically, right? But I'll take your correction. So they have a different ideology. You do not accept that ideology. And so begins an interesting series of decisions that from the outside, people might say were difficult for you to make. I actually think you made them very easily because I think that you were obedient to your conscience. You start to be slandered in the media. I remember reading the headlines about you, rebel MK, defiant MK, nothing positive ever in the English media about Israel ever came out about you, but you were all over the place. And within those headlines is a story. The story is you chose not to be supportive of Naftali Bennett's aims, but you also made the very clear decision not to resign. Tell us about that decision.
Yeah, so it's related to what I said before, a few minutes ago. As I mentioned, I told Naftali Bennett, I respect you. I respect your desire to be prime minister, your dream. But I didn't came to politics to fulfill your dreams. I came to politics to fulfill our mutual agenda as we declare it, as we swear to follow. And I think that in democracy, the power belongs to the people, to the voters. And I said, you are basically cheating the voters. You are cheating the voters. Yesterday, you said, there is no way, in any chance, no matter what, that I will turn Yair Lapid to be a prime minister because I have, that's Naftali Bennett, yeah? I have my values and I won't betray my values. That what he said dozens and dozens of times and repeated it again and again.
He signed a piece of paper on air declaring that he wouldn't partner with Yair Lapid.
And I told, look, these are your words and basically these are our words. You can say now, you can develop a new story and said, okay, we want to prevent fifth election. I don't recall that that was the main agenda of Yamina. It wasn't. It wasn't. Let's stop creating new ideology that will fit your desire to become prime minister no matter what, no matter what.
So it was a principled decision on your part not to resign, but it was also a tactical decision, because by not resigning, you were able to treble that coalition from inside the political system.
I made two decisions. One, I'm not resigning because I respect my voters. Second, I will fight this government because the entire ideology was a left, progressive, harmful ideology that weakened Israeli in foreign affairs. And we can see how the Biden administration treated the state of Israel in the past year. And we can see how we became far more weaker globally. Just look at the shameful agreement with Hezbollah and Lebanon on the northern border without being brought to the Knesset a week before the election. And I can point many other issues. For instance, rapid growth in terror activities in Judea and Samaria, according to the Shabak database. Also, 80% growth in the Palestinian that are taking Area C with the European Union. That's all happened this year because of the policy of this government. And that's why I decided to fight this government as much as I can. And luckily, with the help of Idit Silman and other and Jida Rinawi Zoabi from Meretz, we managed to bring this coalition to an end.
But it's certainly, to put a button on this, it certainly was not you who rebelled. It was the party that rebelled. You stood
100%,
you stood firm,
100%.
and the party was the one that moved and rebelled against the will of its own voters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I think you can see the results. Bennett is now resigned, is home. Ayelet Shaked didn't pass for the second time the threshold. She's now irrelevant. You know, the public, the people of Israel, they have their they put their say in the election, and these are the results.
So let's talk about the public and the people of Israel. There's been tremendous voter turnout when it comes to this election. One would have thought that after a succession of elections in such a small period of time, there might be voter fatigue. Quite the opposite happened. What accounts for that high turnout?
Look, when you look at the right wing, it's the first time in the ongoing election, that we are in opposition. And so we can clearly see the results of losing the election. And what's the meaning of minister like Nitzan Horowitz, Benny Gantz, and many others, and what's going on with the Arabs, anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian Arab list in the coalition, in the government, blackmailing the budget of the state, funding the most radical organization, anti-Israel organization in the civil society, like Ajik, like the Islamic Youth Movement, like more organizations that are basically acting against the state of Israel. And so it created a huge awareness and motivation to go and vote. And also the fact that people are fed up with the election, said, okay, once and for all, we want a clear victory. And Lieberman, with his almost anti-Semite campaign ideology against the Haredi society, his policy to bring them, to put them down, to legislate rules directly against the Haredi public. It brought the entire Haredi population to vote in enormous numbers. and he said, I want to throw the Haredim and Benjamin Netanyahu to the garbage. And people remembered his quote and say, okay, we make sure that's not going to happen.
I think that both in the United States and in Israel, one thing is very, very clear. The voters are not fools. The voters are not fools. They are not easily fooled. They understand what they're looking at. And so I'd like to ask you this question. Naftali Bennett and his coalition and Yair Lapid and the same coalition, they never did anything outside the rules of the electoral process, but they did much against the spirit of the electoral process. They never really had legitimacy to form that government, neither Naftali Bennett nor Yair Lapid. But now we hear the claim that your likely coalition partners, specifically the right religious parties, that they are illegitimate somehow. Can you tackle that claim for me, please?
Yeah. So first, there is a huge difference between Lapid and Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett cheated his voters. He swore in God that he's not going to form a left-wing government and he's not going to put Yair Lapid in the prime minister office. On the contrary, Yair Lapid was just using the weakness and the temptation of Naftali Bennett, and he went absolutely legitimate to the prime minister office. I'm not blaming Yair Lapid for nothing. So he was not cheating and is a legitimate prime minister. But the way he acted from the moment he went into office was just like he's acting in his own political party. In his own political party, it is just Lapid. There is no opposition. There is no debate. It is a one-man show. And it's like a North Korean party. And he took the way he behaved and act in his own party and brought it into the Knesset to sign an agreement a week before the election without bringing this agreement to the Knesset, without any serious debate. That's just, it's counter the spirit of democracy. It's irrespectful to the Knesset members. You know, even when there was a small discussion at the Committee of Foreign Affairs and Security, he didn't show up. Benny Gantz didn't show up. The Energy Minister didn't show up. Only some people from the army and ministry offices came, but none of the leaders came to answer NK's questions from the opposition about this agreement. And same goes to the agreement with the teachers.
Just
without bringing the agreement.
You're referring there to the agreement over the
huge salary reform agreement between the Ministry of Education and the teachers organization, right. A huge agreement. It didn't pass the Treasury Committee in the Knesset, and it didn't pass the relevant leaders, professional managers in the Ministry of Education and Treasury. And it's another example to the way he acted, not to mention to switch and appoint the chief of staff a month before the election. And we know the chief of staff shouldn't be necessarily from the party of the prime minister, but I don't know, but if Herzi Halevi is against an attack in Iran and Benjamin Netanyahu thinks that's the right decision to make, we have a problem. And it's a serious problem. I hope that's not the situation. But if that's the situation, it's a problem. And it was created by Lapid, who decided to appoint a chief of staff a month before the election. And I think it's one more wrong decision in terms of a democratic culture.
Okay, you've said a lot there. I'm just going to summarize it. The first is you take exception where Lapid was concerned or is concerned to the unilateral deal with Lebanon over the gas fields, also over teachers' salaries, two very different issues, but tied together by this unilateralism on his part.
Yeah.
And then you also have an issue with Herzi Halevi being tapped.
No, I don't have an issue with Herzi Halevi, just the way he was appointed.
Right, being tapped to become and he is the incoming chief of staff of the Israel Defense Forces. Now, you've mentioned there, Amichai, I wasn't going to ask about this, but I will now. You've mentioned there this idea of it being problematic that Herzi Halevi is opposed to a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. And Benjamin
might oppose. Be. I don't know his opinion.
Okay, but even if he is, and I know that you're correct to say that's a problem, but here's my point on that. That's not a new problem, right? This is something that we know, for example, that Gabi Ashkenazi, when he was chief of staff,
sure, that's why, based on the knowledge we have, you can see, look forward and say, maybe you're putting us in a very difficult situation.
My last question, and then I want to know about your future plans. You've given us a great dissection of what took place up to this point.
Sure.
The presence of former chiefs of staff in Israeli politics. So we had the cockpit that they called themselves, which was former chief of staff Benny Gantz and former chief of staff Moshe Bogi Ya'alon and former chief of staff Gabi Ashkenazi, and they formed up with Yair Lapid. And now you've got Benny Gantz, and Benny Gantz has drafted into his party Gadi Eisenkot, who's also a former chief of staff. Is this a good thing? To my mind, it doesn't look as particularly impactful or sensible to assume that former chiefs of staff make great legislators.
So look, basically, it's absolutely legitimate for a former chief of staff to go into politics.
Agreed,
that's democracy. You want to go do it. But I think it's amazing to see the data that's coming from the votes of the soldiers. 20% of the soldiers vote for Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. Far more than the votes of the soldiers to the Mamlachti, party, Benny Gantz and Eisenkot, which basically it's fascinating because it is, in a way, a rebel, against the culture and the ideology that is coming from the top command of the army. The soldiers on the ground see the top command as a bit detached from what's happening on the ground, a bit too much affected by progressive ideology, not enough connected to Zionism, not enough connected to their needs to be more safe when they are tackling Palestinian riots, Palestinian terrorists, and they want more back, they want their back to be safe. They want to have an ability to fight back and to use the weapon when stones, rocks, Molotov cocktails are being thrown at them. And I think it is fascinating to see it. And I think that the era when former chief of staff were political celebrities is gone. So every chief of staff can decide to go to politics, but we know for sure it doesn't necessarily give them more credit than any other politician.
Yeah, I can tell you, as someone who served myself and who has faced the things that you've just described, I very much hope that era is behind us. I don't think that they should be coronated as prime ministers the way they once were by the media and so on and so on, and certainly not by the voters. So let's talk the future. You're number 14 on the Likud list, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
What's your ambition going forward within the Likud? What do you want to see? We've talked about what you didn't want to see in the party you used to belong to. What do you want to see from the party you very much are part of now?
So look, we have various strategic challenges, huge challenges. First and foremost, people in Israel, especially in mixed cities like Lod, Akko, Ramle,
Mixed
people in the
cities, Israeli
Galil,
Arabs and Israeli Jews.
yeah, people that lived in the Galil, in the center of the Galil, in the Negev, in Beer Sheva, they feel insecure. And they feel insecure, especially after the events of Shomer HaChomot, Guardians of the Walls. And we need to change that. And people want to feel safe. And we need to fight these crime organizations, very strong organizations that are terrorizing agricultures, חקלאים, כאילו, people who are dealing with farmers, yeah, and on the roads you have a culture of racing during the night in the Arab, the Bedouins, and also in the Galil, illegal construction all over the place, and that's, I think, the number one issue. We call it sovereignty, meshilut. That's the number one challenge. If we're not gonna do major actions and if we're not gonna see a major change in this specific issue, so there is no reason, no justification for this new government. Second, we want to bring Israel back to its former position as a leading power in the Middle East, as a leading global power. We want to see new agreements, peace agreements, peace agreement, not giving up more lands to the enemies, but peace agreements, for instance, with Saudi Arabia and maybe more, to strengthen the coalition against Iran that is dealing now with a very, very tough protest, the Masha Amini protest. I think it is a huge event. And I think that the US current government is not doing enough to support these protesters, and some of the people in this government are actually harming the ability to support this very, very important process. Look, from 1979, we haven't saw a real threat to the revolution, the Khomeinistic revolution in Iran. I think this is the first time that's a huge strategic opportunity for both the US, Israel, and the entire Sunni moderate coalition in the Middle East. This is one of the greatest things that is happening right now. So that's the second thing. And third, it's to bring stability to the ministry office, government for 4, maybe 5 years, stop the endless elections, to bring stability, to bring security. That's, I think, the big missions we have.
So I just have three last questions, because I know that you have a limitation on your time.
We have Shabbos.
Pardon me?
Shabbos.
Absolutely, Shabbat's coming. So talk to me about you. Where do you want to go? Do you have ambitions to hold a particular ministry, whether now or in the future? What would be your goal, Amichai? You've been drawn into politics, you're here, you've battled your way to where you are. What is your ambition? Tell us honestly.
So look, as an amateur marathonist runner, I have patience. I don't have a specific office that I want to be the minister, but there are specific issues that I really, really want to promote. First and foremost, it's the strengthen the Jewish settlements, the Jewish presence in the Galil and in the Negev. The villages in the Galil, the Jewish villages in the Galil are very, very small, and they are becoming more and more smaller because
Yes.
the lack of construction.
Yes.
And it's creating a situation where actually we're going back to the partition decision 70 years backwards.
And by the way, you can see that from the roadways as you travel north in Israel.
Nachon, nachon. It is a huge, huge challenge. We must fortify, we must strengthen the Jewish presence, Jewish settlements, Jewish villages in the Galil, in the Negev. It has a clear connection to security in those areas, because when you don't have a solid Jewish presence on the ground, you have security issues that are following. And second is, I think, Zionist and Jewish education. We have a new reform coming from Shasha Biton about the entire aspect of learning history, poetry, literature, and Judaism. And it is a very poor reform that basically says, instead of being examined and need to learn and to really to remember these issues, you can just do and not as an individual but as a group a work, and that would be instead of the tradition final exams of high schools. So I think it puts us in a very I would say even dangerous situation for the identity of the younger generation, not to learn about Beit Sheni, not to learn the Bible as seriously, not to learn nothing from the Mishnah and the Gemara and the entire Jewish endless literature. I think it's a tragedy. We're not in a very good situation before, but now with this reform, we're going into a much more difficult challenge.
So I wholeheartedly support your desire to build up the Jewish presence in the areas that you mentioned. One small suggestion that maybe you can take to the powers that be or implement as you advocate for this position, I strongly, strongly recommend that the state of Israel stops calling them settlements and starts calling them communities. When we say settlements, people think of a tent on a hillside. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about
an English settlement is just a yeshuv. It's just like a village,
exactly, but it's been hijacked in the English language.
Okay.
I would like to see them talk about communities.
I have no problem with the word settlement. We are it's in Eretz Israel, so it's 100% okay.
Yeah, no, it's not that there's a problem, it's that can we get to where we want to go to? So I'm with you on that. So let's move to the second of my last three questions. I spoke earlier in the interview about this anxiety that we're seeing, a lot of hand-wringing, even in the American Jewish community, about the coalition partners of Otzma Yehudit and so on and so forth. Tell us about how you see yourself working with them.
Okay, so look, some of the members of this coalition, they do have a problematic background. Let's mention Itamar Ben-Gvir, okay? I'm not saying that these quotes from 20 years ago are okay. They're not okay. But I spent hundreds of hours with Itamar Ben-Gvir in the Knesset at the Inner Security Committee. I don't think that he's racist. I don't think that his quotes from 20 years ago are relevant. He's changed. He's far more moderate. He's far more responsible. And he's, I think, the people that will meet Itamar Ben-Gvir and will actually speak to him or will follow his interviews in the past year, they won't see anything that is illegitimate. He is on the right side of the map. But I see his opinions, his current opinions, as legitimate. He wants to have a more tough policy when it comes to crimes, what's going on in the Galil, the Negev that I mentioned before. And I see it as a legitimate policy. About the Haredim, so as we know, Haredim, they are divided to many, many groups. And Shas, for instance, the Sephardi community of Shas, they are very much Zionist. They learn Limudei Liba in their system of education. So, and we do have a challenge with some of the groups in the Haredi society, like the Gur Hasidut and other that are they are behind in terms of Limudei Liba, in terms of learning math, English, etc., etc. And it is a challenge. It is a challenge. We cannot ignore it. But they are just one part of the coalition, and you have the main part, which is a liberal, right-wing, biggest party of Israel, which is the Likud. Mm-hmm. And we are the main power, and I think we are responsible, and we know what to do and how to balance the different parts of the coalition. And for also, it's important to mention that if there were not a ban, a boycott against the Likud and against Benjamin Netanyahu, we can have more partners to this coalition, but it's their choice not to join.
So, Amichai, my last question for you, I'm looking at the bookcase behind you, and I remember from my conversation when I interviewed you in the Knesset earlier in the year, you are part of the Likud Party. You're not somebody who is wearing a kippah at this moment, but it's very, very clear that your positions are informed by and infused with Judaism. Tell us about the role of Judaism in your life and the role of Judaism in your life as an elected official.
Yes, so my liberal and humanist perception on life is coming from Judaism, from my Jewish identity. And even when I looked right here, I have the books of John Locke. And when he's speaking about the nature situation and why we can demand from a human to be human before we have a state, he's going to the story of Cain and Abel, saying, look, Cain said that I did an awful thing when I killed my brother. Yeah, everyone who will see me should kill me. That's what he's saying to God. And from this story, John Locke, one of the founders of liberal thought, is bringing his proof to the value of human life and the right for life. So I see it goes together. And our connection to the land of Israel, the land of the Bible, and not just the Bible. I live very close to Yodfat, where Josephus Flavius was fighting against the Romans. And back there, you have Tzipori, where Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi founded the project of the Mishnah. And so I feel very, very close to my Jewish roots. And I think there is no Zionism without Judaism. And in a way, there is no liberalism without Judaism.
Well, I think that it will be a pleasure for our viewers to have heard from you and our listeners. I very much enjoyed meeting you in the Knesset and in the gym. Keep running the marathons, both literally and proverbially. Okay. And I wish you to go from success to success in all that you do. Thank you for being a principled politician. I think that's a rare thing today, and it's appreciated. So thank you very much on behalf of the MirYam Institute. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, and thank you all for watching and listening. Thank you.
Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Good Shabbos.